Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, June 19th, 2026. This week's Chairman's Report is guest written by Jade Walle, Vice President of UR Energy Incorporated, a CPA, and a member of the Americans for Fair Taxation Board of Directors. The worst kind of taxes. This year, Wyoming legislators are considering the elimination of all residential property taxes with their House Bill 118. When accompanied by Wyoming's 1974 constitutional prohibition on a state income tax, Wyoming could be the first U.S. state to completely eliminate both state income tax and state residential property taxes. Interestingly, according to a RocketMiner.com June 12, 2026 article entitled "Lawmakers Revive Proposal to Remove Wyoming Property Taxes," recent efforts to provide relief to Wyoming residents on increasing property tax assessments has been discombobulated at best. The article highlights, quoting here, "The meeting opened with a look at the effectiveness of the relief measures already passed by the Wyoming legislature. Since 2023, lawmakers have implemented a 4% cap on year-to-year assessment increases, a 25% homeowner property tax exemption, and a 50% exemption for long-term residents over the age of 65. However, testimony from state revenue officials and county assessors said that the system can be so complex that many of the citizens it was designed to help are being left behind." Ken Guile of the Wyoming Department of Revenue testified that only about 44% of eligible Wyoming homeowners actually received the 25% exemption during its first year of application. End of quote. Now, however well-intentioned these relief measures have been over the past 3 years, we can never forget that U.S. citizens, whether they're working or retired, don't suffer governmental and tax-related burdens very well. We need things simple, clear, concise, and with as few moving parts as humanly possible. The FAIRtax, H.R. 25, does exactly that at the federal level. The Wyoming proposal would compensate for the lost residential property tax revenue primarily with a 2% increase in the state's sales and use tax rate, where citizens would have a choice of how and when they pay their taxes. Wyoming's Joint Revenue Committee will reconvene in August to review the specific language of several draft bills, including a redrafted constitutional amendment that would set the residential property tax assessment rate to 0, contingent on a corresponding state sales tax increase. It will be exciting to see if Wyoming legislators and ultimately the people both recognize and seize this unique opportunity to capture the first mover advantage that a state free of both income and property taxes would have. Despite the usual refrain from some lawmakers that local services would suffer irreparable harm without these property taxes, the conclusions are this: simpler is better. And a single state sales tax is the most effective and simplest way to collect the same amount of state tax receipts. We are psychologically predisposed to abhor taxes that are personal to our income and our property. One of Adam Smith's primary contentions was that civil government is instituted primarily for the security of property. Property taxes are a de facto seizure of our property, which violates the principle that our property and property rights are essential to liberty. Income taxes seize the very source of most of any prosperity that we will ever require. Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations wrote, "The property which every man hath in his own labor, as it is the original foundation of all other property, so it is the most sacred and inviolable." What Mr. Smith was saying is that the fruits of our labor, in other words, our income, are sacrosanct and should not be infringed upon. A topic for future discussion will be the effect of the type of tax we pay on the level of illegal evasion we endure. We often like to quote Abraham Lincoln, and we could all likely recognize 2 or 3 of his most famous quotes instantaneously. However, we'll bring today's article to a close with one of President Lincoln's lesser-known quotes that highlight how important it is for our country and states to respect an individual's property. Property is the fruit of labor. Property is desirable, is a positive good in the world. That some should be rich shows that others may become rich, and hence is just encouragement to industry and enterprise. Let him not who is houseless pull down the house of another, but let him labor diligently and build one for himself, thus by example assuring that his own shall be safe from violence when built. In conclusion, as Jade made clear, the FAIRtax Act, H.R. 25, is more than just a proposal for a retail sales tax. It's a fundamental restructuring of the federal fiscal structure and makes our labor and our earnings sacrosanct. Unlike other excise taxes, which are normally applied to specific products and in different percentage amounts, the FAIRtax applies a 23% inclusive rate to all new retail products and retail services. The FAIRtax is the answer. The FAIRtax is a national retail sales tax on new retail goods and retail services. It provides a family credit so that all purchases up to the poverty level for each family are not taxed. There's no withholding from your paycheck, and you never have to file a tax return again telling the government how much you earned and how much you spent, and you'll never ever be harassed by the IRS again because the FAIRtax abolishes the IRS. Now, many of you have labored tirelessly for freedom from the federal income tax and the IRS. You deserve a great deal of credit for your efforts to educate the American people on the need to fund the American government in a way that's good for America and returns freedom to the American people. It's imperative, though, that we don't replace the current income tax and the IRS with an alternative system that could still be manipulated by the ruling elite. We must let Congress and the President know that the best way to replace the income tax and the IRS is with the FAIRtax. Now, make no mistake about it. The FAIRtax is a grave threat to the ruling elites. It will strip them of their power and their ability to control us through the tax system. Their opposition to the FAIRtax will be fierce and unrelenting. And don't think for an instant they won't use half-truths, deception, and downright lies in their desperate attempts to hang on to their power. However, with the support of this president, we can finally eliminate the income tax and the IRS. Of course, the best course of action is not only to repeal the income tax and abolish the IRS, but to repeal the 16th Amendment as well, so no future administration can ever shackle the American people with an income tax again. We must come together and ensure that real tax reform, the FAIRtax, is not subverted by the elites in D.C. This will take the diligent effort from all of us. We need your financial assistance, and we need your grassroots assistance. Now, if you have contacts that will allow us to get more information about the FAIRtax to President Trump, please let us know. Please email us at info@fairtax.org, and we'll give you some options on how you can best help us. At a minimum, please call your congressional representatives and ask if he or she supports the FAIRtax. If so, thank him or her for their support and suggest they become a co-sponsor of H.R. 25 if they're not one already. If not, ask why not. Now, if your representative claims to be unfamiliar with the FAIRtax, offer to have someone come to their office and explain it to them. The solution? Pass the FAIRtax. Now, why would D.C. pass the FAIRtax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to FAIRtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the FAIRtax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.